Today, we have a very special guest on. He founded a company at the dawn of the internet age, and it is still going strong, celebrating its 25th anniversary. So we're going to talk with him about his journey and how the world has changed in the last 25 years. So stay tuned. I have with me Jake Nichol. He and Jacob DeHart started Threadless way back in 2000 in Jake's apartment as a t-shirt design competition that has now grown into an online community of artists where designs are created and chosen by an online community. It was a 2006 Wired article about Threadless that first coined the term crowdsourcing. So we're going to talk with Jake about how Threadless has evolved and how the internet has changed the world over the last 25 years. Welcome, Jake.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me on the show.
Threadless is old school. When we talk about OG internet companies, it's like Amazon and Threadless. You know, we're going to have to
Right?
just bucket you guys together. But seriously, there was a lot of companies that started back then and very few survived to this day.
Very
And
true.
I want to highlight how difficult it was to do that and how innovative you had to be at that time to do that, because like all the things that we take for granted now just were not there. The very concept of crowdsourcing didn't exist before you guys were out there doing it. So you were kind of revolutionary at the beginning, and the fact that you've been able to maintain it and continue and grow and evolve and do new things is very cool. But why don't we start with, like, what were the origins? Where did this all start?
I've always had kind of like both left brain, right brain kind of interests. And, as a kid in high school, I would write a lot of graffiti, but I also got a job at our web developer, our local
Legal
ISP,
graffiti or illegal graffiti?
mostly illegal graffiti, but I never really did it on people's property. I would go in the woods and find like an underpass and, I never really went too crazy with it. But then on the side, I would teach myself how to code and, view source in a web browser. And I think I got my first job as a web developer when I was 14 years old, building websites for like the local plumber and stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
you're the my neighbor kid knows how to build websites.
Yeah, exactly. And I would build them for my friends. Like I had a friend really into Star Wars, so I would build like a Star Wars fan site. I was really into the band Korn, so I would build like a Actually, I was number one search result for bunions because I had bunion surgery on my foot when I was like 15 and made a website about it. And so all these older women would email me asking if they should get bunion surgery.
And what's the
Yeah.
recommendation? Yes or no on that?
I said wait until it's like you can't bear the pain anymore because the surgery is not really fun either.
You heard it here first.
And then yeah, I guess Threadless. I when I was choosing where to go to college, it was kind of between going down like computer science or going to art school. And I was kind of already I was working as a web developer in high school, so I decided to go more the art side, do something different. And so my degree was like multimedia web design. I was learning Director for like CD-ROMs in the back of encyclopedias and stuff like that.
Right, right.
Um, and Threadless was really just a hobby I kind of built on the side. So I was a member of this forum called Dreamless that was mostly digital artists creating art on their computers. But they were never, there was never anything physical that we could have. And I was literally spending every waking moment I had on this forum, and I had nothing to show for it in my real life. So started like printing some of the cool designs on posters and t-shirts, and then set up Threadless as a website where people could order them and I'd ship them. But really just a hobby for the first few years.
I know you were operating like out of your apartment initially, right? What
Yeah.
was that sort of tipping point? You're like, wow, I can make this a business.
So there's like an intersection of this hobby where I was spending my free time. I was going to school and I was also working a full-time job. So my full-time job was back in web development. School, I was learning this web design, and Threadless was this side project. And I think my junior year in school, I hired my first couple employees, and I hadn't finished schooling yet. And so I kind of like tried to see if I could test out of some of the final classes. Because funny story, I actually wrote a chapter for a book called Action Script 5, and it was
Yeah,
from like the programming language within Macromedia Flash. I wrote
right.
a chapter for that book, and that book was in was used as the textbook for a class I hadn't even taken yet. And the school would not let me test out of that class. And that was when I was like, screw it, I'm dropping out.
Well, that is so the early days of computing and the internet, because I like those computer science classes. I remember them back in the 90s, and like they were just like
Yeah.
so full of irrelevant information, and it was changing so fast. It's kind of like the world of AI right now, where it's changing so fast, like nobody can kind of keep up with it. I think the art school was the right choice, and just by I can see in the back corner there like a blue dog's
Yeah,
statue there. Like art is core to your existence, and
absolutely.
like
Yeah.
you have artwork everywhere in your life, so it seems like that was the right choice to make.
Yeah, I think so. I'm happy with that choice. But I think, yeah, I remember learning Director 7 in school while using Director 10 in my job. And like, yeah, in terms of like keeping up with the latest versions and with AI and stuff, it's hard to do that at school sometimes.
Well, and I think that's the fundamental thing about a career in tech is you have to be passionate about it, and if you're not
Yeah.
self-motivated and passionate, it just doesn't come together.
Yeah, because you really need to always be wanting to learn and continue your education like on the job. I mean, I learned a lot more like just playing around with my computer than I ever did in front of a computer in a classroom. But yeah,
Yeah, no, I can imagine, and I think the same is true of AI nowadays too. So all
yeah.
right, tell me a little bit. Like, so you started off, and this kind of came out of a competition to find good designs. Like you literally invented crowdsourcing. I'm just gonna make that bold claim for you. You don't have to. You invented crowdsourcing. So like, what was the what, I mean, did you know that's what you were doing when you created it, or is it like you're like, wow, that's kind of a great idea. Let's just do that.
I thought of it more of just making cool stuff with my friends, not like there are all these like kind of academic terms for what we were doing coming out around the time. Like crowdsourcing was one by I think Jeff Howe was his name, the editor of Wired, who came up with that.
Yeah,
He also talks about going on Warp Tour and seeing kids like tattooing each other, writing poems, and then like turning some of that into their jobs. And I don't know. I think it comes from a more casual, just doing cool stuff together place, but then it's been kind of commandeered by academia and then also bastardized by corporations where they see it as a way to almost take advantage of these communities of people. But there was mass customization, user innovation. We're a case study in Harvard. I've spoke at MIT, Stanford. I mean, all these groups that were like really curious about how we're using the internet to kind of revolutionize product development and stuff. And it had an impact on me where I started taking myself almost too seriously. Where, oh yeah, look at me creating all this technology to. But then after a while, realized no, we're just making cool stuff together with friends. That's what I like to, especially when you start to see other companies compete in this space completely and clearly taking advantage of these communities. It made me feel better about the origins of it and setting aside the seriousness that came about.
well, so you kind of mentioning it here now. One of the things that really was a big deal early on in the internet world was the idea of exploiting communities with crowdsourcing, right? I mean, could you
Yeah.
speak to that controversy and like how that impacted you, and like your perception of all that?
So there's a concept called spec work that I think a lot of it falls under, where, say there's websites where you can pay like $5 and get a logo for your company,
Right,
and 500 people submit ideas, and only the one that's chosen gets paid the $5. And all the other pieces are useless because they're specifically made for this purpose of this company with their name and all that. Um, I think it's a little bit different when you're talking about art. So we don't really have a brief, and people in the early days we only printed the top one out of every 1,000 designs uploaded, but none of the designs were to like a brief or a spec. It's
right,
more like the, I would ask, like, when it comes to spec work and what we do, I would ask, like, should a artist not paint a painting until they've already sold it,
right.
or do they paint it and then sell it? They're going to create the painting either way. And this is one way to monetize it. And we're non-exclusive too, so you still, the artist retains the rights to that work, and they created the work, and they're looking to make some money from it.
In the early days, did all that artwork stay on there with, I mean, because now you have the concept of the artist shop. And so which is cool. And I'm sure we'll get into it in a little bit. But
Yeah.
I mean, did that art stay on there with them having the opportunity to make money, or just they just took their art and went somewhere else with it originally?
Most of the art still exists, even on the website. You could find it, all those old submissions, but it's up to the user if they want to. Just like if you post on Instagram, you can delete your post. You can delete your work from Threadless
So it
too.
wasn't becoming a t-shirt, but it was an area for the artwork to live and exist
Yeah, it
at
kind
that
of
time.
lived digitally, and then we would only print the best ones. And at the time, it was kind of an innovative business model because it overcame minimum order quantities. Like at the time, if you were
Yeah,
going to buy a t-shirt, you had to buy 120 of them minimum in order to make screen printing, cost effective, because you have to burn the screen, and there's a cost for each color in the graphic and all that. That all changed with print on demand more recently,
right.
which kind of made our whole business model almost irrelevant. But yeah, those early days. Now the industry is kind of going digital with print on demand.
Commerce in general has changed so drastically. I mean, back in those days, everyone was trying to convince people that you could actually purchase things online and that it was secure, and then there's all the issues about the card companies and how much they were charging, and it was really just a greenfield kind of application. Could you talk about how that all e-commerce came together?
Yeah, I mean, now you can just sign up for Shopify and like start selling immediately. But back then we had to build it from scratch. And, even the infrastructure around charging credit cards wasn't there. Like our first version was built on Cold Fusion with a Microsoft Access
Oh man.
database where we would store the credit card numbers in raw text in the database. And every day at the end of the day, I would literally call a 1-800 number to type in people's credit card numbers on the phone to charge them for their order at the end of the day. Um, and then, yeah, taking my lunch break to ship the orders, package everything up. All the t-shirts were just kind of under my desk. And my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, would come up from college. We had a long distance relationship for a while, and we would spend our time together shipping orders for this thing.
It's a miracle you guys ended up married,
Right?
after all
Yeah.
that.
We started dating like 6 months before I started Threadless, and so she's basically a co-founder.
Well, and she still works with you there too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
She took
that's
some
pretty.
time off when our kids were first born, but yeah, she's been working there really most of the time.
Being able to work with your spouse is a tricky thing, and
Yeah.
the fact that you guys have pulled it off, that's another miracle. You guys are kind of a charmed company over there.
Yeah.
So let's kind of start fast forwarding a little
Yeah,
bit here,
yeah.
because I mean, like, there's a lot of like interesting innovations that kind of came out of what you were doing, and I think it's hard for people to really understand, like, considering the state of where we are today, just a mere 25 years ago, like how different the world really was. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
wait 6 to 8 weeks to receive this, thing, send a self-addressed stamped envelope. Now it's like online. We went from catalogs to all this. So where are we now?
Well, I think another big transition between then and now is social media had a huge impact on our business because in the early days we were on forums. Artists would upload their designs, there'd be comments, people would go, spend a lot of time uh, with each other on our website. And with social media, people started to move where they connect with people to those areas.
Right.
And it's also hard now for artists to really promote themselves because even if you have 50,000 followers, your followers are being shown like videos of somebody diving off of a 100-foot cliff and not necessarily the content that you're like. It's just weird curation and algorithms that make it really hard for people to get in front of their own audiences.
Right.
Um, but print on demand is probably the biggest change that we've seen. So where we are today, yeah, we built artist shops about 10 years ago. So I don't know if I find it helpful to think about other industries that have gone digital, like
Yeah.
music that have moved from analog formats to digital formats, photography. Um, and so it's kind of happening in our industry too, where, and really all of these, all the companies that are doing really well, like say digital photography, even the iPhone, the first iPhone's camera was terrible, right?
Right.
But it would have been wrong for Apple to wait until the camera got really good to start investing in that technology. So we've always thought, the early days of on-demand printing would be like you go to Office Depot and get a iron-on sheet of paper for your inkjet printer that you can print out and then like iron on. That was not good enough,
No.
but there are companies that started with that technology, like Cafe Press and Zazzle and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but there's still to this day, I think people think of the quality being that, for
Right.
those types of platforms. And so for us, it was kind of a matter of getting the cost and the quality to a point that was maybe not on par with screen print, but just about ready to hit, to get it. And so I think we timed it well. We started doing print on demand in 2008,
Okay.
and then in 2015 is when we transitioned the entire business to print on demand. So it was like a 7-year kind of R&D process of getting that print method to the place we wanted it to be. And we still do a lot of screen printing for our retail partners. A lot of people probably don't know we sell more T-shirts at retail than we do on our own website, and we sell more T-shirts on artist shops than we do on Threadless.com. So if you go to
Interesting.
Threadless.com, that's like tip of the iceberg of what we do for artists. So artist shops basically was a way to leverage print on demand to give every artist their own white label store for their brand. And so with artist shops, Threadless is just behind the scenes. Like we do the manufacturing, we do the fulfillment, but it's the artist brand that's front and center there.
Yeah, well, and I think the thing that's really cool about Threadless is you have that like 25-year back catalog of like literally every, piece of art you could
Yeah.
think of or want. I mean, it's an incredible. I mean, like how much is in your catalog right now?
Well, we've had 600,000 artists send us designs. We have
That's
about
wild.
3 million published designs that are available for sale. Across those designs, there's over 6 billion SKUs. So SKU being like size, color, garment, like a small red t-shirt. So yeah, there's a huge amount of content, and then any artist that publishes on our platform, we moderate them to categorize it, try to figure out does it make sense in the marketplace, can we work with it on this retailer, all that kind of stuff. And so within the moderation, we take different tactics to try to find the best way to get each shop to out there in the world.
Like I know you curate, there's like sort of a big feed of like most popular and things like that. Are you individually curating that feed for individuals?
Not so much individuals, but more for like retailers. So,
Okay.
these designs would work really well at Kohl's. These designs would work really well at Spencer's, stuff like that.
So as an artist, you could upload your design and it could end up selling at Kohl's.
And some of those we sell into the brick and mortar stores, like mass produce stuff, but we also have e-commerce integrations with them for print on demand.
Oh
So
wow.
if you buy from Kohls.com, the products that are listed there, there's a wider variety and it's made to order just like on our site. And then the ones that sell well online are sometimes brought into like rolled out in the stores.
Being an artist is a very difficult gig, and
Yeah.
it's usually to some extent a life of poverty, right? So I mean, like, what kind of like how do the artists get paid out of all this, and like what does that look like?
So in the early days, we would pay like a flat fee of, I think in the beginning, it was like literally $50 and a free t-shirt. And then that grew to $100, $200, 250, 500. And then I think we were up to about $2,500 for a flat if anybody won the challenge
Yeah,
but then when we switched to print on demand, that's when we switched to a royalty based model. So now it's like per unit sold, the artist earns, it varies because on artist shops you can actually set your own pricing. So say
right,
our base price is $15 to actually produce and ship the order to the customer. Anything the artist uh, prices it above that is what they earn. Um, so, but on average, artists make between like 10-20% of the retail price on on those products, which is pretty good. Like Disney, for
yeah.
example's license royalty rate would be like usually between 12 and 15%. So some
I'm
artists are
surprised
making
it's
more
that
than
high.
Disney. Yeah,
Yeah, right. Yeah, but and you're not just this is not just t-shirts anymore. I mean,
right.
this is really like art on demand,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. We've opened up like so many categories. I mean, like iPhone cases, skateboards, wall tapestries, art prints, mugs, all that kind of stuff. And that's a really exciting thing about the industry right now is like what can be made to order. Um, you know, make on demand. I always use neon signs as an example because like most neon signs are made for a specific, like it might have a phone number on it where it's made to order. It's
Right.
made um but then man, we almost did a partnership with like Dunkin' Donuts to um design the pattern printed on the icing on the donut. Like I mean
Oh,
there's
wow.
like weird stuff. There's a company in Israel called Kornit that makes the printers that we use. It's an amazing company. They're like so innovative. I mean, they're just on the forefront of any of this technology. And they created a roll to roll fabric printer that can like cut in and dry in line. There's still the sewing that has to be hand done, but once I think truly cut and sew, make on demand apparel is very close to getting there. And at that point, you could
Wow.
imagine like anything, dresses, board shorts, like uh, any apparel product you can
With a full
imagine.
pattern across the whole thing.
Yeah.
So you're actually making the fabric.
And there's companies that have dabbled in the idea of like trying to get rid of this of universal sizing. So, like small, medium, large, extra. If everything's made to order, it should be made to fit us exactly too.
Wow.
And that might be 10, 20 years off, but this is what
That'd
this,
be pretty cool. That'd be
yeah,
pretty cool.
that's like the implicate. You don't really think about what these make on demand implications can have, but also sustainability is a huge one because something like 40%, I read the stat, 40% of all apparel just goes unsold.
Well, and because there's a lot of plastics and things like that in fabrics, I know that's contributing to like, microplastics in the ecosystems and things like that.
Yeah. Like, I mean, polyester is fabric is plastic, right?
Right.
Essentially.
Since we're talking about sort of the economics of how it all works out, I want to take it back to like the first dot-com crash, like
Yes.
around 2000, 2001, right? Like you guys weathered that. Not many companies did. I had a company that was victim of that crash myself, so I know how brutal that was at that time. But like, what do you think it was that allowed you to survive that first crash, and then like when it crashed again and again, like what was it that gave you the wherewithal to survive those?
Well, I think the first one was so early. I mean, I wasn't even taking a salary yet. And being a developer myself, I think I remember building this website for deepdiscountdvd.com at my job. And it was like, the client paid like $300,000 for us to build this e-commerce website. Here I am, a
Oh, wow.
developer getting paid like 40 grand a year, building it in like 3 months. And I'm just thinking, man, if I had something to sell, I could build the website myself and wouldn't have to pay this $300,000 fee to build it.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think just being like super
Super
early,
lean
scrappy, lean, yeah, helped a
and
lot.
nothing to lose, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's a hobby. I'm still working a job on the side, going to school during that time. I think around 2007, 2008, we actually grew through that crash somehow. Um, I think, we still kind of had the wind in our tails and our product wasn't really high cost. In fact, a lot of people who were maybe buying higher cost products
More
switched to
expensive stuff.
us.
It's like instead of the button down shirt, they went to a t-shirt.
Yeah, let's just scoop a $10 tee from Threadless instead because the economy sucks.
Yeah.
So I think that may have helped us through that time. But I think even going back to that first 2000 crash, I mean, we've always been very just nimble and scrappy and lean, and we're we're able we make the hard decisions quick and early when we see inevitable issues coming up. Like, I mean, even with COVID, shit really hit the fan in March of
Right.
what is it, 2020,
2020. Yeah.
and by April, May, I mean, we had made some pretty tough decisions at the company we did a furlough and such. But it was by June that we got masks up on our platform, and all of a sudden we had the best year we've ever had that year, and
Yeah.
brought everybody back. But just in the face of uncertainty, I feel like that's when I work the best, to be honest. Like, um, when there's a problem to solve. Like when things are going well, I feel like it's easy to sit back and just, um,
Coast.
Yeah.
Well, I think the thing that's interesting about problem solving is like there's a finite goal and a finite
Yeah.
timeline to solving that problem, which is appealing. Whereas like big open-ended projects, for somebody like me with a little bit of the ADHD going on, I'm, like squirrel, squirrel, squirrel,
Right. Yeah. It's nice to have someone to focus the energy on.
So you say that you make those hard decisions quickly. Like that is not an easy thing to do. What goes into to doing that, and what makes you good at it?
I think the first like 8 to 10 years were really just a lot of growth years. And then we had a really hard time in 2011, 2012 about we were kind of like just starting to learn advertising because for our first 8 years we didn't do any advertising.
Wow.
Um, and then we figured in 2012, with after a few years of experience there, we're like, let's really go all out this holiday season. And we bought a ton of inventory and set aside a huge ad budget, and it completely failed. And we were
Ugh.
left like, having spent a ton of money, and now we're stuck with a bunch of inventory that never sold. And so that was the first time I had to make a really tough decision, really the hardest year of my life, really, and never wanted to end up in that again, So I
Right.
think the learnings from that helped me foresee it more in the future, and then also act at the right time.
I think it's the acting part that's hard because that takes a lot of there's a lot of emotion involved and when things don't go the right direction,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
hard to the tendency is to continue to walk down that path until you're just forced to make a change,
yeah.
which is obviously not the right way to do it.
I've hired a lot of friends. Like I said, I work with my wife. I've had a lot of other family that have come in and out of the business, and try to always make sure that this is, business is business and friendships are friendships. And, tomorrow is promised to no one, whether in any way of reading that quote, I think.
Yeah, family, friend, or stranger.
Yeah, but I think what's helpful is being just feeling confident in that I'm doing the best I can,
Right.
and that I'm not like purposefully trying to screw anybody over, and we're all in this together, and I'll be grown-ups about it. I mean, I've had so many people leave the company, whether it's they quit, they get fired, there's a layoff, and that's never why you want to hire somebody, is for them to
Right.
leave.
Right.
Um, but I think seeing what some of those folks have gone on to do later is so amazing to watch their trajectory and how I mean, the CTO of Obama's campaign used to work at Threadless, and seeing stuff like that is really fun.
Yeah, sometimes like that change in your career is the thing that launches you into the next great thing, and that's true of some of people too. I mean, like they
And
sit in a job that they know is not right for them, and
mhm.
they're not happy, but they just don't make that change. And sometimes being forced to make that change can really jettison them in the right direction.
Yeah, it can be definitely very hard for a few years, but
Yeah.
sometimes works out for the better.
You talked about custom clothing. You've got you're making fabric and stuff like that. I mean, we're living in the age of AI. There's so much new commerce opportunities and things like that, and you're sort of expanding the reach of art and selling art and what that means online. Where do you go from here? What's next on the agenda?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the software for connecting the dots between all this make on demand production and all these creators out there, I think AI is something that our community absolutely hates right now. And I too, like, I'd much rather buy, um, you know, art created by an actual artist and not
Yeah.
through a prompt. But I do believe that there's ways that this software can be helpful to artists too. But it is a kind of like controversial time right now there. Um, I think one thing is a lot of artists, when they upload to our platform, they don't often tag their designs, and they don't write a very descriptive product description. And that stuff's really important for search because,
Right.
like the search engines aren't looking at the image. They need to be able to scrape some words.
Right.
So. There's stuff like that that could be helpful for artists just for describing their work. Um, and then I think it could be fun for just prompting inspiration. Like we haven't built anything like this and we don't have plans to, but when I see a retail trend come through, like, hey, um, like furries are really popular at Spencer's. Um, what if the AI knew your art style and just created a couple of designs, not to actually sell, but just to get your mind going on like
Inspiration.
what could be done? Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think, when we talk about AI, one of the things that's interesting is the comments often made that, like, for some reason we've got AI doing all the fun creative work that we were promised we were going to have time to do because AI was going to take away all the mundane stuff, but we end up doing all the mundane stuff and they end up doing all the creative stuff. But it
Yeah.
sounds
Isn't
like
that
there's
weird?
opportunity there for like especially descriptions and tags. That is the definition of mundane stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's inevitable and we'll got to figure out where we are gonna where we live in this space. I mean, it's coming, so we can either fight it or be a part of it.
You guys now are outsourcing the fulfillment of your or the production of your wares. Do you envision bringing that in house at any point?
Yeah, even in the screen printing days, we outsourced it, but we did do our own fulfillment back
Right.
then. And I loved having that warehouse, that space. We would have bands come play, and it was just like a really great energy for our culture. And then when it comes to production, there's all these innovations happening, like I was mentioning that Corny Israeli company, but it hasn't really been brought to the front end, like consumer side. So I feel like I would love to try to figure out a way that we could start doing our own production and start leveraging some of uh, those innovations because I mean, you can print. I mean, back when we would screen print, we would do metallic inks, we would do puff inks, we would do glow in
Right.
the dark, we would print on the sleeve. Like anything you can imagine can be done in scale. But with print on demand, we've integrated with 30 different suppliers over the years, and to get one of them to do it is a chore, but then to get all of them to do it is like impossible. And so if we owned the full like supply chain, I think we could offer a lot more really fun decorating methods to our artist community. Like already on print on demand, you can do puff ink. They call it like density ink, where they layer on more. You can even do like lenticulars and stuff. And
Wow.
um, yeah, I think that kind of stuff would be really fun, but it kind of can't be done without us just doing it ourselves at this point.
Well, and I got to imagine. I mean, you talk about integrating 30 different partners over the years. Like this has got to be a field where a lot of them just kind of come and go too. And so you probably find a good one, and you're like, oh God, now I got to find
Yeah,
something else.
I think a lot of that has to do with how early it is in print on demand, where there was kind of new, just the equipment. Like say you buy 50 like $100,000 printers, and then all of a sudden a new printer comes out that makes them all obsolete. Like it's really hard for a company to then transition. So we end up just working with a new group a lot of times when stuff like that happens, unfortunately.
With all this, what is your favorite piece of art that is on Threadless right now?
I have been really loving this artist, Burger Baby. She has some of the weirdest designs I absolutely love. One of them is like it says "Follow your dreams," and there's this girl that's like a hamster habitat, and so her dream was she always wanted to be a hamster habitat. And then there's a little bird next to her that says like, "How the hell did those hamsters get inside you?" It's just weird. I like the weird stuff like that, kind of lowbrow art.
I mentioned the statue in the back, and I think the thing that's interesting about you is you're a big fan of art and the artists. And one of the things that you've done
Yeah.
is collect a lot of artists' work over the years and actually commission a lot of art too.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite thing to do is to go to the cons, go to Artist Alley, talk to the artists. Like I love going to Designer Con in Vegas, Collected Con. But yeah, I mean, we commission artists, whether they're a part of Threadless or not. I mean, all the time. We have a whole room in our house that's all like family portraits that we've commissioned from different artists. One was like my favorite comic book artist, Jason Howard. We commissioned him to do cover of a fake comic that's like our family, and we also both my kids got to choose what their superpowers would be for the cover, and they got illustrated that way. And Shandi, my wife, commissioned this artist to do like plushes, like little felted plushes of our
Oh,
family.
that's fun.
Um, yeah, they're pretty cool. And then this artist with the statue behind, his name's Jeremyville. And Jeremyville is just incredible. He does like a daily drawing that are very inspirational. And he made that statue for us. And it's meant to be like a stereotypical threadless artist. So he's carrying a little sketch pad and a pencil next to him there. But
That's
yeah, it's very cool.
that's a great way. I mean, like the thing I think that's cool about it is, as somebody who's been in this business now for 25 years, I love that you still have the passion for the art, and that's sort of the cool core piece of what Threadless is, I think.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you for saying that. Because yeah, that is. I don't see that a lot from our competition. I don't see that love for the art, and there are a lot of the artists that decide to go exclusive with us. That's why, because they see it. Not just me, but like Lance, our head of VIP, our whole team. I mean, one of our company values is be an artist, and I mean that. We made like little posters of all the different company values, and be an artist. There's this guy Seth Godin who describes artists as like a nurse is an artist when they go out of their way to make you feel more comfortable when you're going through like a challenging I mean, they don't have to do that as part of
Right,
their
right.
job. So yeah, like bringing a piece of yourself to your role that's not just a cog in the system.
I think that's a great piece of advice for any business, any person. It's like, just make your life better by just nourishing the
Yeah.
artist in you.
If I was just selling t-shirts for 25 years, I think I'd be out of this business a long time ago, but helping artists make money is a really fulfilling job.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, keep up the good work. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. It's been an awesome conversation, and good luck in the future. And I got to go dig around because I need some t-shirts. So I'm going to go find some stuff on there. And last but not least,
Yeah.
where do people go? Threadless.com, right? And
Yeah,
anywhere else?
threadless.com is the best place. I think if you go to artistshops.com, that's where to sign up if you're an artist that you want to start working with us.
Okay.
But yeah, threadless.com is the best place to shop.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And if you could, give us a like, think about subscribing, and share this with a friend. And I will see you in the next one.